Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 52nd Cybersecurity Awareness Forum live panel session and the final session for 2024. In today's session, we're going to look at some of the more interesting cybersecurity stories that sort of cover a range of incidents and things like that, and get people's views on what 2024 looked like and what we expect from 2025. So really looking forward to this one. I'm Scott Wright, CEO and Chief Engagement Officer at ClickArmor, and your host for today. If you're a security awareness manager or security professional, or even a business manager who's concerned about cybersecurity and human vulnerability, you've come to the right place. And we have an experienced panel of experts today and a very engaging audience, ready for a fun and informative session. The CSAF, as we call it, is an open collaboration group for anyone who's passionate about security awareness and human risk management. And the CSAF is a series of sessions brought to you by ClickArmor, which is the employee cyber confidence builder. It's an engaging cybersecurity training platform that is unlike anything you've seen before. So if you're interested, we'll talk a little bit more about it at the end of the session, and always feel free to reach out to Ryan or myself. So let's get started. And before we introduce the panelists today, just a reminder for attendees to enter into the chat where you're coming from today. It helps us understand our international composition of these sessions, and also encourages you to be active in the chat. So our format, if you haven't been with us, is we do some open questions for the panel, and anybody can chime in or ask questions about them. But we also do some poll questions. So we're going to have a few interesting poll questions that everybody can participate in, and we'll share the results at the end and get people's comments. So now let's meet our awesome group of panelists. Ryan, would you like to do the honors?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Welcome, everyone. Happy holidays. I hope everyone is doing safe. And thanks for joining us in our last session of 2024. Joining us on the panel today, Michaela. She's the founder of, oh, my screen just disappeared. My founder of Cybility Consulting, provider of cybersecurity advisory services and engaging learning experiences. She works with leaders to embed cybersecurity into their organizations using the Cybersecurity Conductor's Companion and the hacker approach to playful learning that sticks. She's also a STEM ambassador, mentor, and lifelong learner. So welcome, Michaela. Great to have you again. And we also have Fleetus, who is a seasoned IT and security professional, currently a security ops manager. Beyond his experience, he finds immense joy in sharing his passion for cybersecurity with others. Thank you again, Fleetus, for having the time to join us. It's great to see you as always. I'm Ryan Healy-Ogden, the Director of Cybersecurity Solutions over here at ClickArmor. I'm happy to join you guys today and to have a great final session of 2024, looking back and looking forward. I'll hand it back over to Scott, and we'll kick things off.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'm Scott Wright, CEO of ClickArmor, and I've been in the cybersecurity space for over 20 years now, doing cybersecurity, or before it was called cybersecurity, IT security consulting, working in various different organizations, public and private sector. And we started doing this about 2 years ago, so or almost 2.5 years, I think. So it's been a long time. But before we get started, let's just do a quick roundtable through the chat to see where people are coming from. So we have myself in Ottawa, Sai Sandeep in Toronto. We have Tyler in Southern Pines, North Carolina. Amonigo in Regina, Canada. Irfan in Copenhagen. Elizabeth in North Carolina. And Anthony, can't remember where Anthony said he was from.
I think Anthony's in the Bronx, if I'm not mistaken.
Awesome. Yeah.
But hey, Anthony, you can always correct me.
And Wale in Regina, and of course Ryan in Ramara, Ontario. So lots of people still joining. So welcome everybody. Now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen so we can get on with the session and into our cool discussion. Let's share my screen, and there we are. And if you haven't been here with us before, we record these sessions. We distill a lot of the information into blog posts and also into quarterly reports that we publish. So you're welcome to use the QR code, download those things, and also to join our cybersecurity awareness community. So To today's agenda, we're going to look at a few different aspects of the stories that occurred in 2024. We had one of the major phishing attacks that was published not too long ago in August was the Patelco Credit Union, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Similarly, we'll talk about some ransomware attacks from the BlackSuit ransomware group. Then we'd like to dig into supply chain vulnerabilities and another type of story that was around that with the Volt Typhoon campaign. Then we'll broaden things a little bit and talk about human error in cybersecurity in 2024. What did we see? And what do we expect as major risks in 2025? So before we go too far, I'm going to launch our first poll. And so would love everybody to just chime in on their thoughts on this. And basically, the poll question is, what do you think has been the greatest challenge in improving employee resilience to phishing attacks in the past year? Is it lack of awareness of being targeted by employees, or lack of awareness of employees that they could be targeted? Lack of motivation to learn about best practices in phishing defense, lack of quality training content, and phishing threat and defenses, and lack of good quality for assessing good quality metrics for assessing proficiency of employees. So I'll let this poll run a little bit and see how people respond to it. But let's dive in a little bit for people who hadn't heard about this attack. And I'm going to open it up to the panel and people can enter their comments in the chat as well. But we're going to focus for a minute on the Patelco Credit Union attack, where we had a breach that exposed sensitive data of over 1 million customers, and that the attackers used phishing basically as a way of compromising Patelco's systems. And it really kind of highlights something in the area of third-party risk management, supply chain, and things like that. And we'll talk about another one of those soon. But also generally continuous security training and ability to spot phishing attacks. So I'm going to open it up to the panel and see, first of all, if you have any comments on this attack, or if there are any other kinds of phishing attacks in the year that sort of caught your eye and that we can learn from. How about Fleetus? Would you like to start things off?
Anytime you see a phishing scam, it goes back to what we've talked about, just the social engineering aspect of just helping employees understand. So to be honest, I'm not surprised, again, that these are still successful, as we talk about with Verizon, we talk about with other polls, Eins, Sands, others who put this out. We, the human, are continuing to be the one that's going to be attacked. So the exposure of 1 million customers, again, I don't know the full set of their customer base, again, is similar to other attacks in which we've gone through. And I agree with your last point here. Third-party risk management is something that a lot of companies have failed to recognize. They look at their top N, but they don't look at N+1. And N+1 is usually the one that's attacked. So if you're a Fortune 100 company, you're probably monitoring your top 50 versus your top 51 or 59 or 100. So I think that's where we get to, is we have to realize every vendor is important. So third-party risk management and supply chain attacks, which I think show up in later attacks we're going to talk about, are imperative for us to help. And then going back to the human, it's back to that stop and assess. It's easy to fall for a scam because we're emotional, unlike a computer who processes ones and zeros the same every single time. We can easily be spoofed into clicking, or we can easily be convinced that this is legitimate, and we proceed with sharing information.
Yeah, great points. As usual, Fleetus, you're spot on in sort of bringing this back to some of the things that we've talked about in the past, but you've got to reinforce those things for sure. Michaela, do you have any thoughts on this point?
Yeah, so I feel like, yes, we absolutely, it does come down to the phishing as always. That still is obviously the number one method, for people to actually successfully breach a network. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of, with this one in particular, that it did still take over a month for them to detect it in the first place. And so there's something there around, in addition to, yes, we need to support and educate our staff, we also need to actually bolster that instant response detection capability as well as part of it. So I think there's the two strands there. The other thing I would just add is certainly for a lot of large organizations, the traditional phishing simulations that have been happening and the way that they've been implemented, I often feel is not really as effective as it could be. I think there needs to be a shift from focusing on easily reportable click rates to actually focusing on, are people reporting what they're seeing? Are they using the appropriate channels? And actually looking at, again, improving that instant detection capability.
Yeah, excellent points, Michaela. I think especially, certainly we try to focus on the security awareness and the human aspect of things, but of course, it's layered security is what we always recommend. And so the technologies and the policies and procedures are important too. So totally get your comment about incident response being something that maybe we've sort of neglected a little bit. So great points. Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it in a different sense as well. I kind of looked at, okay, what happened post breach, like post attack? How did they handle their customers? How did they handle their employees? How did they handle their security going forward? And one of the things that was actually noted was very positive, I want to highlight, is that a lot of the credit union members actually applauded the company for their transparency and communication. And that doesn't necessarily always happen in cyber attacks, right? A lot of the times people want to like, oh, I was attacked, so I don't want to talk about it. You have that shame, that guilt or whatever. You maybe might not be transparent, right? They did the opposite. They went out, they had regular updates. They're going to pay for, they're going to pay for the fees and help people through the, the hard times. Understanding that, it's a credit union, it's your life savings, it's your livelihood. It is likely the most important thing that you wake up every morning and fall asleep at night is, people are always thinking about money and they're especially in this economic state. So I think it's very important that organizations understand that, okay, it's happened to us and we now need to move forward responsibly and we need to make sure that we treat the humans, because I'm always thinking about the humans, with the utmost respect, and that comes down to making sure the staff don't get blamed for this process, that this was an error that can be corrected, and make sure that the credit union members who are the only reason you exist is because of their financial livelihood, that they're not going to be, I guess, sent off with a negative, tone. Reputation is a huge thing when it comes to cybercrime. I always reference this, but like we all remember, what happened to Home Depot in like 2011. It still is talked about now. It's 2025, right? We're still talking about attacks that happened, now 15 years ago almost. And so it doesn't go away tomorrow. It definitely doesn't go away overnight. So I think it's how you approach the unfortunate situation and how you deal with it on the back end of the attack can really help you learn from it, and hopefully then give your people the confidence that, okay, we went through this. We went through this as a team. Now let's kind of bind together, learn from this mistake, and come out stronger on the other side.
Highlight one thing real quick, and I think Michaela and Ryan both hit it. It's the lessons learned and the after actions. It's imperative when it comes to these things. We always focus on the pre-mortem and the mortem. It's always post-mortem. Post-mortem is what sets your culture. How did you handle it? Did you applaud? Did you do blameless? Did you remove the titles? Did you say, my colleague fell for this? Like, it's important, again, on the SecOps point of view, that when my team responds to things and when we engage, that they feel comfortable saying yes. Yes, I clicked this. Yes, I did that. Knowing that there's an opportunity for us to now partner, because you are the first line of defense. Like, our tools are there, but things get through. That's what we have to be imperative. So the post-mortem, the after action, the lessons learned is where we're going to build culture. It's how do you respond after the event, not just before the event.
Great point. Michaela, yeah, you had a comment?
Just to pick up on what Vita just said there, actually, we shouldn't miss the opportunity as well to actually share those lessons from the incident and be really open about what happened with staff within the organization, because that in itself will really sort of level them up in terms of helping to watch out for things in the future. So yeah, that's just another thing just to really highlight that point.
Yeah, really good points. I also wanted to highlight a great comment in the chat from Shelley about, maybe we've sort of gone over over the top a little bit in terms of our focus on how we teach people about, the little things to spot, misspellings and hovered links. And she has a story about arguing with her husband about an email that looked legit to him, but in fact, probably wasn't. So I think it's a good lesson just to remember, we have to keep in mind what people who we think have been trained actually don't know. It's very easy to think people have gone through training and now they know these things, and even the things that we're guiding them on may not necessarily be the exact clue that should trigger their
Yeah.
response, right?
And that's changing, right, with AI and technology and
Yeah.
everything else. That broken English email doesn't exist anymore. Bad grammar shouldn't really, I say isn't, but it shouldn't really be a thing anymore, because there are more than enough tools, to do that for you, and even just obfuscating links and grabbing domains. Like, everything is so easy for the attackers,
Yeah.
that it's constantly a struggle to try and keep the employees aware.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, great discussion on that point. I'm going to launch our second poll question, which is, what's your assessment of the state of security awareness training across the industry? Kind of goes back a little bit to Shelley's point, but we're trying to do a little maybe our aggregate level assessment at a general level to say the industry is doing well in keeping employees trained and ready to face cyber threats. There's significant room for improvement in employees' cyber proficiency, or the industry is generally not keeping up with emerging threats, or the industry is failing on most threats, or you don't know. So hopefully people will have a chance to answer that poll question. And we'll move on to our next open question, which is about ransomware. So there was a set of attacks from the BlackSuit ransomware group this past year that led to encryption and exfiltration of critical data across many sectors. So the interesting thing here is they've used things like VPNs and brute forcing in their initial attacks. So maybe not necessarily phishing related that we've focused on a lot for ransomware. It often seems to be triggered by phishing, but this is just another sort of way we should be maybe broadening our perspective in terms of how we talk about these things. But I think it also lets us know employees need to understand the impacts of things like ransomware, even though they don't need to know the technical details from my point of view. They really need to understand it's so important to take extra measures not to get it, because it's so insidious. So that's kind of the viewpoint I have on it, and just wanted to open it up. Who would like to take the first shot at it from the
Yeah.
panel?
I mean, I don't mind.
Yeah.
With ransomware, it's absolutely devastating. It's one of the probably the worst things that could happen to an organization, especially, BlackSuit. They don't really go after the small guys. They have a bit of a profile for, healthcare and larger organizations. They're a professional, gang, probably, very experienced in what they do. But I think the important thing about ransomware is, Scott, you're right. We don't need to inundate people with the technical aspects and telling them what it does and all this, but they need to understand the business aspects and impacts and how it relates to their job. And I think, like any other kind of emergency management plan, fire safety, harassment policy, I think employees should understand what their ransomware plan, procedure, and reaction should be, right? You should never leave that to a guessing game. Again, it's the old fire drill rule. You don't just hope that your people know, where the exits are. You tell them, because you're liable for it, right? So, why don't organizations treat ransomware the same way? Why is it such a hush hush thing that you don't want to talk about? And again, you don't have to scare people. You don't have to use over technical, terms, but if anywhere you are in the organization, what do you do if you walk up to your desk and your computer's locked, or someone sends you a message saying it, because those matter of minutes could be what decides the fate of the organization. If everyone just spins in circles and lets it, propagate across the entire network, and get to a point of no return, and you're all just sitting in a boardroom, wondering who to call, that's unfortunately too late. And so I think this one needs to be a lot of preemptive conversations, normalizing it, and
Mhm.
talking about it like it's, the same as, I remember when I got like my first job in retail, someone told me, hey, the phone's going to ring one day. They're gonna try and, you know, tell you that they're shipping computer paper and office supplies, you know, to the business, and they're going to ask you to authorize it. You know, this is a scam. You need to understand it. You know, don't do it, because if it shows up, you know, it's not a good thing. Blah blah blah. And this happened all the time, right? Where I'm sure we're all aware of this. And that was a phone scam, right? It's just evolved. And I
Yeah.
was made aware of it on day one as like a 16-year-old at Toys R Us, right? Don't don't buy $10,000 worth of printer cartridges that we don't have a printer for, right? But I mean, you were made aware, you were brought into the situation, you were explained why and how it impacts the business, and I think that's what we need to do with ransomware. Because I ask people, do you know what ransomware is? And they work on a computer and all the time, and they say no, and that just
Wow.
blows my mind.
Again, yeah, what people don't know that we expect that they do or assume
Yeah,
they do. Yeah.
right.
Michaela.
Yeah, thanks for that. You just reminded me of a little story recently, actually, which is kind of relevant. I'll just share very quickly. Somebody was sharing how they'd received a phishing email. It was somebody new to the organization. They didn't know about, you know, gift card scams. They went to WH Smith, as it is here in the UK. It's a large stationery store. And thankfully, the person who was actually serving them said, you know, who actually asked you to get these gift cards? And the person shared that actually they got the email from their CEO. Surprise. And
Mhm.
thankfully, the lady said, actually, I suspect it probably isn't. Do you want to go and check? And because of her interjecting, so her training was actually saving a customer, which I thought was a lovely example of how, you know, when awareness is done well, it can actually help so many people. It sort of ripples out.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things as well I wanted to sort of pick up on what you were saying is the preparation for incident management is so important. And it's worrying, like here in the UK, there's still over like 60% of organizations do not even have an incident response plan. And so what we try and do is encourage people to think about it. And you use the term fire drill, we talk about cyber drills, because why aren't we doing cyber drills, you know, for staff? You know, everyone's used to, as you say, those fire drills and you know exactly what you need to do. For me, I think it should be exactly the same. So I just wanted to pick up on that point, and
Yeah.
I think that's where we need to get to.
And your story just reminded me of a quick story I have to share. So recently, you know, Scott and I were working with an organization, and we're kind of just discovering them and meeting with them for the first time and understanding what their security needs are. And of course, we got into, you know, what are some of the common attacks you were receiving? And said, oh, well, we unfortunately got hit with a gift card scam, and our employee ended up, you know, it was thousands of dollars in gift cards she purchased. And you know, they kind of laid it out that, you know, she thought it was the CEO. She was convinced it was the CEO. She was in line at the store, and a police officer engaged her and said, are you sure you should be doing this? You know, this is, you know, red flag. This is a scam. And she said, no, this is definitely our CEO. This is, you know, it's all good. And she then went up to the counter and she emptied her, you know, she maxed out her corporate credit card. She maxed out her personal credit card, and she emptied her checking account to buy gift cards.
Crazy.
And you know, so like the obviously the awareness of the employee, I you know, I wish that they had that in place, that you know, that she didn't have to go through that experience. I applaud, you know, the awareness of the police officer to actually try and recognize a scam. Well, he's just probably, you know, on his break grabbing a bite to eat or something, right? But the one missing piece to all of this that I keep thinking about is how we need awareness from those retailers. And you know, it's not their responsibility, but it kind of is their responsibility. You know, they are selling that product, so maybe they should have a little bit more safety and understanding around what the product they are selling, right? And you know, you don't, you know, you wouldn't sell lottery tickets to minors. You know, there's all this different kind of training in these situations that you try and make judgment calls. And I think that if we brought, you know, the convenience store clerks and the Best Buy clerks and all the places that sell gift cards kind of into the realm of these things happen, then maybe there would be more ways to kind of, you know, to stop it at that level. You know, just like you were saying, where the cashier's like, hey, wait a second, are you sure you want to give me all your money? You know, that's probably not your CEO, because I always joke that I think Scott just lives on gift cards. He's like a robot that he's always asking me for gift cards. Like he'll hit me up at middle of the night and have me going out to the store to get him more gift cards. It's crazy.
Hey, we do a lot of events. What can I say?
And I've never been to one of them. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, sorry. Cletus?
I'll chime in. This is something that I've actually had some discussions, similar to yours. Western Union does train their employees, so you don't see that happen as much anymore. Target has started putting it, their CISO, I've talked to their CISO, or at least their deputy CISO. They even put that into their training for their cashiers. If you see large amounts of gift cards being purchased, you need to call a manager to validate the approval. So they're using 2 people. So that way there's two injections. So Target has started doing some of that, at least enabling training. And I've heard of other smaller companies who are starting to look at that for big cash advances to go with that one. What I put in chat for the last one applies to this one. The curse of knowledge is what gets in our way. We assume our end users know more than they know, to Ryan's point, and we use terms that mean something totally different to them.
Yeah.
They don't understand the common terminology, so we have to get back to the basics of explaining what simple things are. Instead of saying ransomware, just talk about data loss of data. You're going to lose your wedding photos. You're going to lose your child's pictures. Put it into something that they can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Most employees are okay if they lose their company data because it's not theirs. They don't feel the ownership of it other than it's a project they have to reproduce. But if you put it in a format, you're going to lose your wedding photos. You're going to lose the first steps, the video of your kids, or an example that's personal. It goes much further when you're trying to explain ransomware. In this case, talk about encryption. Why you don't do things in plain text. Like we have to understand, you don't have to use the word encryption because most of them don't understand what encryption is, but just say, we want to apply these data classification labels. When you do that, it hardens it for you. It protects you from this because you can't move it if it's got an internal or confidential.
Yeah.
Or like your keys are important. Like you just have to go to explaining what these technical terms are to them, but in daily terms.
Yeah.
You guys have all heard me. What do you do if you get locked out of your house? Talk to the lock because communication is key. You want a dad joke? There's your dad joke.
There you go.
Communicate to the user.
Yeah, it's so important, and I think just having that terminology that people understand that we sort of assume is understood by everybody. One alternative, a little tip that I've learned, rather than talking about encryption, talk about scrambling the data. Everybody understands what scrambling the data is. Not many people understand what it means to.
I had to pick up my punch cards and put them back in order.
Scrambling your cards. Yeah. I was almost that old. Okay, Michaela, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so again, just picking up on a point there that, the attackers, the reason they're so successful is because they're able to connect to the emotion, that sense of urgency. And that's exactly the same technique that we need to be using as you're talking about making it personal to people, connecting it to something that they care about for the education side. So, in both cases, it all comes down to, how you feel, how you make somebody feel. And I think that's the key thing. And then you can use storytelling as a really effective way to help with that. And again, little anecdotes and analogies really help for people to understand as well with the terminology challenges that we have.
And a shameless plug for both of us, but an interactive and immersive kind of learning environment really goes a long way though, because you get to show people in our fakes and frauds course it's all around social engineering, and we have kind of like a choose your own adventure on Rails situation where we allow users to be in a social scenario where the boss is giving them a call on lunch, saying, hey, can you do me a favor, and the user has to choose the right path forward, and they're course corrected if they choose the incorrect path. But these are methods that aren't atypical in training, right? A lot of the time, it's like, here's your PDF on ransomware. Don't be the one to click. And you're like, well, I don't think that's really going to move the needle and solve any of our problems, right? Like it's just a general statement. It's not showing users what they can do, what can be done, and it's almost to their point. It's like, should we just pop it up on the screen being like, your iCloud is locked, your Google photos are locked? What would you do? right?
Yeah.
Like I know I would go down to my safe and get out my backup, but what would you do?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to be really careful though, and I think help maybe distinguish between what Michaela said about using emotions, and
Mhm.
hoping that nobody takes that to mean we should use fear, uncertainty, and doubt,
No.
to scare
No.
people, right? But what's interesting about what Ryan said, if you can get people into a scenario where they can see a scenario unfolding and kind of feel the emotions that the person is going through in that, call it a case study or an adventure, and then they realize, oh yeah, I can see why you might be convinced to do this because
Mhm.
of that situation and maybe the emotions you're feeling. But we're trying to help people recognize those so that in the future, when they actually face them in the real world, they can say, ah, that's probably not real, and I don't have
Yeah.
to panic too much.
And that's exactly why, like again, Click Armor does such a great job when we have our situations where people can have a safe place to practice their skills, right? You can get a bunch of potential phishing emails thrown at you, and it's not real life, but it's real enough that you can experience it. You might get a little sense of heightenedness, right? You might get that emotion, which is good because again, you need to be able to connect that to your real life experiences in your inbox, but you're not actually like where phishing simulations kind of show up in the middle of your workday and you freak out because you don't know what's going on. It
Yeah.
might not be necessarily the best emotional response.
Yep. So I'm going to try and move on a little. We've got a few more things to discuss. And I know Fleetus has a hard stop at 45 after. So I'll start the next poll question, which is, in your opinion, what's been the most significant threat to organizations that target employees? Phishing attacks with malware, phishing attacks with social engineering scams and frauds, other social engineering scams, or events that leverage employees, poor hygiene, and leaves technical vulnerabilities. That's another one we haven't talked a lot about, but just kind of curious what people think about the relative threat and significance of those things. So I'll move on to our one of our other talks about supply chains. This one is the Volt Typhoon campaign, and it's a lot around the Internet of Things. And we used to think of IoT as, well, lamps that you can control or toys that, can be smart or whatever. But now pretty much anything electronic that you purchase, even for the business, wants you to configure it by going to the web and setting up, its settings. And that becomes part of what we call the Internet of Things. So that's a supply chain security issue, right? Any thoughts on that?
I could spend all day on this one and I don't, but like supply chain, I think is where I want more focus in 2025. We talked second to third party risk management. Not to pick on Target again, but it's your suppliers that get you in trouble, or your third parties. Or if we pick on SolarWinds, to be nice again, I talked to Tim Brown the other week on some of this. Like there's just a lot of stuff that happens when you don't have the right checks and balances in your CI/CD process. So your continuous integration, continuous deployment or delivery, when you allow things to get signed, we can pick on CrowdStrike again, the channel file. There's just a lot of stuff that happens when it comes to supply chain. So specifically with this one, the living off the land, from a security operations point of view, again, this is the biggest heartburn because there are tools you have to allow in your environment for administrative tasks that can easily be compromised. So getting your end users to understand your employees, do not use it without a change ticket, project, a PR, get approvals to use these tools so that I can baseline the activity and I have a place to check. If it's not baseline, it should be triggering. It should be anomalous. It should be easy to pick up. Your sales team shouldn't be running PowerShell. Your marketing team should not be executing bash scripts in their environment or running change mod to change files on their Macs. There are things that we can get from the supply chain piece that immediately flags your SecOps, your security team to start their investigation. Goes with the human, see something, see something. So going back to HRM that we've talked about, human-centric security goes a long way with me telling you, I trust you. I just don't trust your rights. I trust you as a person. I just don't trust the rights that I had to give you to do your job. And this is why. And explaining the inverse of separating person from their role and the rights that their role has.
Can I ask you a quick question, Fleetus? I actually haven't done a lot of reading on it, but living off the land, can you explain what that means to people?
So similar to what I was just talking about, it's interjecting into system level processes or components that are allowed to run in your environment. So that could be hooking into a system DLL in your Windows that's starting up on boot to make sure you get persistence. Again, I mentioned PowerShell, anything that can run that scheduled task. This could be any job that's allowed to run at a system level or elevated privileges. So any application that can run elevated. And some of that's in a container.
Right.
Some of that's free. Like heaven forbid you let your browser have admin rights, but it used to.
Yeah.
Would be a
Okay.
problem. Like you don't want certain things running with system level permissions or admin. Or
Yeah, remember when web browsers, people discovered web browsers could be file explorers,
yes.
right? And web browsers had admin rights, so they could run like Flash, right? So I mean, there is a lot of problems where all of a sudden, you know, people were like, "Oh, it's just a web browser. What can you do?" Well, you have full access
That
to a
leads
system.
into the other thing too, to your point. Our browser is our entry point to everything we do now. Your
Yeah.
IoT discussion. I have to launch a browser to do SaaS. I have to
To do
launch a
anything.
browser to configure something. I have to launch Chrome, Firefox, Safari. Most users aren't launching a fat client. They're not clicking on an icon anymore to do work. They open their browser of choice, put in an IP address, a short string, or a fully qualified domain, and start working.
Yeah, even Microsoft and Office and everything else is going browser heavy, right? All the apps and everything else. It's crazy to see. And third party supply chain, I think it just scares me. Like all the different companies that Scott and I interact with and we interview and we talk to, and we're helping them on their security journey. It's a very low number, I'd say, Scott, that when we say, well, how's your third party, how's your supply chain, security? And not many of them are saying, "Oh, we've got it, uptight, secure." Right? It's there's some contractors here. People log in from all over there. Oh, those guys, we just allow them to do this, and we send invoices over like insecure PDFs. Like, there's just so many things, but they could have the best security in their small organization, but it's everything around them that they have no line of sight on, and that's where you're going to get burned, because attackers will simply just step back, right? Like, I mean, if I'm trying to get into Fleetus's house and the front door is locked, well, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to the garage. Oh, okay, the garage is locked. I'm going to check the back door. Oh, okay, I'm getting up on the roof. I'm going through the bedroom window. Finally, I found a vulnerability because he thought the main ways in were secure, but you're not looking at the holistic picture, and I think that's a major concern of mine, and looking forward.
One more thing to this, because I am going to drop in a few minutes, that I want to remind people again. When we think about third party, think about supply chain. Everyone now has decided that a browser plugin is imperative.
Oh my
Be very
goodness, yes.
careful about the plugins that you're allowing your users to install and where they're installing them from. We won't even get into the semantics of that one, but just know the IoT device that we talked about generally gives you an app or a plugin to manage it. Just check the permissions that you're allowing that plugin or that app to use on your mobile device or in your browser, and regularly audit those. That's where we can go back to correcting, because if I have 60 tabs open, which I do right now, and I have 4 plugins running, those tabs and those plugins can read every tab I have. And if I happen to have PI or PHI open in one of those tabs, because let's just say I'm a Salesforce admin and I'm looking at something, or a medical coder who's putting in EOB codes into a benefit portal, but I have a plugin that's scraping that. I don't know that until someone tells me that it's reading the contents and keyboard logging.
Well, especially all these helpful plugins that people usually get tricked into installing, right? It's like, oh, your AI assistant plugin this, oh, your calendar integration that. But these plugins don't, to your point, Fleetus, discern what tab they should be interacting with and what data they should and shouldn't be looking at. And that's wildly alarming. Yeah. Browser plugins, Wild West.
I'll leave it at that before I step away. Just audit, check your permissions. When you're living off the land, if you don't need the app anymore, uninstall it. There's no reason to keep the app on your
users should not be able to install browser plugins. End statement, done. Like, there's no reason for users to have that ability. Fleetus, I will take this moment to say happy holidays, Merry Christmas to you and the family. I really hope you guys have a safe and wonderful holiday, and I can't wait to see you again in 2025.
And thanks for all your contributions on the panel this year, and look forward to next year's.
Look forward to continuing this in the future, and I will talk to you guys later. Have a good day.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And Michaela, we didn't give you a chance to chat much on that last bullet, so we'll open it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge topic that's probably, certainly like a day conference in its own right, to be honest. So some of the things that I'll just draw out in particular, then, yeah, I'm right there with you. Supply chain security absolutely terrifies me. And what's sort of challenging about it is that there are different techniques you can use, but so many of them, like you think of questionnaires, for example, to try and provide some assurance that your supplier is doing the right thing. In practice, so many of them, they're just not worth the paper they're written on. And I say this as somebody who has been on both sides of the process. And I think we need to focus more on, again, our human people who are responsible for sourcing those products in the first place, and actually understanding what it is they're trying to do. And is there something already in use that can do the same job? Maybe we don't need to actually bring in this other person after all. So I think it all comes back down to the education and the people and the processes for supply chain, as well as obviously the technical side. But I won't go down there now.
All good. So I'm just going to go back to our slides for a second. I've completed all our poll questions, so we'll get to those in a moment. But just like to bring up one last discussion point. Let's talk about what we expect in 2025. It's always fun. I do on the Shared Security podcast that I've been doing with Tom Eston and Kevin Johnson since 2009. We're every year we review, what did we say last year about what was going to happen this year? And it's kind of fun. I don't think we did that enough clearly last year, and we
I
certainly
forgot to
didn't,
look,
and we forgot to look. So
Yeah.
let's try and start the trend now and say, what do we predict for 2025 coming forward? And anybody in the chat, feel free to enter your
Yeah.
thoughts on what you think we should expect in 2025 in the areas of threats, in the areas of human risk management, or what kinds of new buzzwords or things will become important, and generally how will the industry change. So I'm gonna let Michaela have first crack at this one and see if you have any thoughts on where you see things going.
Okay, I'm going to try not to be all doom and gloom.
That's
That's
okay.
what I was going to say. It's like maybe Michaela will have more positivity than Ryan.
It is a challenging time, I think, that we are facing. On the one hand, we've got, I feel like society itself, we've got the people who are really pushing forward with, AI, and we're doing all this wonderful stuff, which is great, can potentially solve lots of problems. But at the same time, attackers are making very effective use of it as well. And so it has a huge gap, I feel, with people and their skills and their ability to either take advantage of things like AI, or to be alive to the fact that things like you're saying earlier, that spelling mistakes in grammar, that's no longer the thing because attackers just use AI, so it's not an issue. So that's one of the big areas that is of a concern for me, without even talking about AGI, which is when it supposedly starts to think for itself. Then the sorry, what was the other thing I wanted to bring up? Oh yes, I think we're going to continue seeing the ransomware as a service moving forward because it's already still so effective. If we just think for a moment about smaller businesses rather than the large organizations who are very good at protecting themselves, there's so many of them who still don't have what we'd call the basics. And again, that comes down to education. So, in the one way, I kind of feel like technology is forging ahead, lots of great things happening. We need to come up with new ways of defending against them. But at the same time, we're still dealing with the same old things that we have been for years. And that's kind of the challenge, I think, that we really face in 2025.
Yeah. I mean, okay, I have three. I'll just try and keep it brief to the three. And I would love, if people have any comments, feedback, or anything, but I think my three, are going to be AI and advanced AI, which leads us into also kind of the deep fakes and the fraud kind of aspect of things. I think that's going to be an overwhelming
aspect of our lives that we're not prepared to, I think to your point, Michaela, we're not prepared to understand, let alone stop. So that's very concerning one there. Quantum computing is my next threat. We're on the brink of quantum computing to be kind of I guess an accessible powerhouse that will simply break our current encryption models. So, a hypothetical of, does China get to quantum computing before, the Western world, and do they use it, to break banking encryption, communication encryption, et cetera, et cetera. Like EES and everything is irrelevant in the new quantum computing world. And so nothing is a secret anymore. And so there's number two. And number three, I think is the scariest one to me is geopolitical. I don't think we really talk about it a lot, but geopolitical cyber attacks are a thing. It's how wars are started. If we look back at the day before the invasion of Ukraine, there was a wide-scale cyber attack from Russia on the Ukraine to destabilize, to cause confusion, and to allow the invasion to happen. China will do this to Taiwan at some point. The writing's on the wall. And then, when does it happen in North America? Right. So when do we wake up one day and banking and phones or, key services are down because of a geopolitical conflict? So again, no doom and gloom here. Just those three small little things are kind of my predictions of where cyber is going in 2025. And I think we're kind of leaving some of the traditional methods behind. Of course, they're still going to be there. I mean, there's still going to be script kiddies going after people and small organizations, but I think things are becoming too professionalized, and it's becoming such a moneymaker in a large state kind of way. Like North Korea, you guys should Google how much North Korea's GDP comes from cybercrime. It's like all of it. And those are the things that are I think going to shake the world next year.
Awesome insights, guys. So my just to wrap things up, my top three, I guess at this point, Michaela actually mentioned AGI, which I believe is artificial general intelligence. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
But there's also something called artificial superintelligence. And I listened to an episode of a podcast called The AI Fix. I don't know if anybody has heard of it. It features Graham Cluley and Mark Stockley. Graham Cluley was from Sophos, you might remember. I find it actually a fun podcast just to get up to date on any of the latest AI stories. But this podcast episode from November 19th, I'm putting in the chat if I can get the link here. There we go. Actually covers the whole idea of AGI, ASI, and has some really kind of scary quotes from the person who founded Anthropic, I think it is one of the big AI companies. Amadei is his first name. But the whole thing here is it goes way beyond the things like deep fakes, which I am concerned about. That's actually my third item, deep fakes and social engineering as a result of deep fakes eroding trust. That's my number three. But number one is actually the bigger picture. If we don't put guardrails of some kind on the development of AI, basically nobody's going to know why or what it's doing. And that can actually lead to, greater things like political instability and some really scary things in our future as a culture. So to say we don't want to be too doom and gloom, I probably sort of took us to a new low there. But getting back to general our industry right now, human risk management was a big thing, obviously, in the last year. That's been people shifting their terminology from security awareness to human risks. And I don't mind that. In fact, we had a really good session back in March, April. I don't remember the exact episode number, but you should go back and have a look if you're interested. It was called Moving from Security Awareness to Human Risk Management, which was actually a really bad title. Not saying we're going to replace security awareness with risk management or human risk management, but in that session, it sort of solidified my perspective on what we're talking about. Security awareness and security awareness training is always going to be a thing. Human risk management is a broader umbrella of things that surround that and are impacted by and influence the whole ecosystem around the humans that we have in our layered security. Whether it's there or not, we have to look at technology processes, and people. And so when we're talking about how we manage people, now we're referring to it as human risk management. So I think that's generally a good thing. But as we move into a more generalized human risk management approach, we're going to have to be talking about things like role-based training and scalable, tailored training, so that you can say it's not about hitting the low-hanging fruit with a quick course people can click through and then they know everything and they'll be protected. Every role now has some security responsibilities, and we have to have a way to tailor the content so that people like SaaS application administrators, right, who have privileges they don't even know what they're for in some cases, and they're not IT people, and they can't really figure this out without help. So we have to actually spend a lot more effort in this new environment and this new sort of initiative to try and get the people who are going to be targeted by these AI-based threats because of their roles where they've never been targeted before. So that's kind of my view of where we're going to be going in 2025. So love to hear anybody else's thoughts from the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to go to our wrap up on the polls just to let people know how everybody voted on these things. So our first question was, what do you think has been the greatest challenge in improving employee resilience? It's actually kind of a spread. No big winner, but people most respond to lack of good metrics for assessing proficiency, closely followed by lack of motivation of employees to learn about the best practices, as well as lack of quality training content for phishing threats and defenses. And then a little less important, but still there is a lack of awareness of being targeted. So do people know that they're being targeted? So that's a really interesting result. I think we'll come back and let the panel and participants comment on those things. But the second one was, what's your assessment of the state of security awareness training across the industry? Nobody is saying that it's doing well. And there are basically people divided, but most people think there's significant room for improvement in employee cyber proficiency, and a few people saying that it's generally not keeping up with emerging threats. Nobody's saying we're failing on most threats, so that's good, I guess. And then finally, in your opinion, what has been the most significant threat to organizations that target employees? And there is a direct winner here, and that is phishing attacks with social engineering, scams, and fraud, as opposed to phishing attacks with malware and other social engineering scams. There's a little bit of a response for events leveraging poor employee hygiene that leaves technical vulnerabilities. We talked a little bit about that in the session today. So I'm going to open it up to Ryan and Michaela just to sort of wrap up with their thoughts on these. So Ryan, do you want to have a quick chat at or a shot at that?
Yeah, I mean, not surprised. I think, it's kind of the way I think most people in the industry is kind of, leading. What, what's your assessment on the state of security awareness training? That's a significant room of improvement. That's great to see. But I mean, I mean, of course, I'm a little biased, but that's kind of how I feel, and that's what I'm going to zero in on. And I just think that in general, take out any topic. I think, we as humans need to continuously need to know more, be aware of more, and learn more. The more we can do that, the better this world is going to be, and the more we can make our own decisions and not, let AI do them, and not, it's this whole thing of, I guess my tip is, don't be lazy. Right? Let's just retain our humanity, learn as much as we can. We are, the world's greatest computer. Our brains are, capable of so much more, so let's put an emphasis on learning for 2025 and being aware of as much as possible. So I think that's kind of what highlights this to me. But I thank everyone for their feedback on the polls. It's great. It's just great information.
Excellent engagement. Yeah, thanks. Michaela, any thoughts on those poll results?
Yeah, so as Ryan was saying, it's not too surprising in some areas. In terms of number one of the things that I certainly see with clients is still that attitude of, why would anyone target me? And not really understanding about being collateral damage. So I think there's still a long way to go in that side of things. It's interesting about the result for the metrics, though, because obviously there's quite a few companies who are really pushing that side of things. And there's only one that I can think of who is actively sort of bucking that trend and saying, well, actually, should we be measuring people to the nth degree and saying, you know, this is their amount of risk in this particular thing? Why don't we treat them as, you know, adult human beings and just focus on the behaviors? So that's an interesting area that I'm sure you could have an episode on next year.
For sure.
Then in terms of the second one, yeah, I mean, agreed. My question is, though, in terms of the opportunity for improving employee cyber proficiency, is why aren't organizations actually working to do that now? Why are they making the choices that they're making? So when we know, you know, that the experiential learning opportunities are far more effective. So that's a question that I've got on that one. In terms of number three, yeah, you know, it's easy money, isn't it? You know, criminals have gone online. It's like, when you can do that so easily, it's just, why wouldn't you?
And it's hard to filter those things in a lot of cases, right? So yeah, excellent points. So I'm just going to move on quickly. We're just about out of time. I'm not going to just dig too much into the insights. We talked a lot about insights through this session, but I'm going to just turn it over to Ryan to let you know about ClickArmor, who brings you these sessions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, ClickArmor, we're you know, interactive and immersive security awareness training platform. We're built for organizations of all sizes. If you're 5 people or 5,000 people, you know, we're scalable, deployable for you. We do have, you know, quick start bundles available on our website for kind of small, medium business, where, you know, I always want to highlight, you know, if you're an organization of 25 people or less, you can get our package and unlimited kind of training for $500 a year. You know, it's a great point to get into. It covers off a lot of, you know, regulatory issues, potentially, you know, compliance issues, but at the end of the day, it gives your people the opportunity to learn the skills they need to protect your business. And more now we see, you know, organizations are under 10 people that are multi-million-dollar, if not approaching hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Because of technology, it can make you so much money, but are people, you know, protecting the assets and protecting their people the way they should? So if anyone's interested in ClickArmor, you can either scan that QR code down there to grab a live demo. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or via email. I'd love to walk you guys through some of these packages, opportunities, or anything else. And we also do custom training and a lot of other professional services. So visit clickarmor.ca to learn more. And thank you again.
Excellent. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks everybody for joining us. That wraps things up. We don't have a scheduled event, but usually we'll have something announced in early January. In the meantime, do join the membership community. We have Cybersecurity Awareness Forum. We post all of the recorded videos there and our invitations to the next sessions. So with that, I wish you all a happy holiday and very prosperous 2025. Thanks for everybody for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.